mates and say, I won't need that for now, so you can keep it. And I was sitting in front of him thinking, what made you think that you were in the middle of Afghanistan, in Helmand, in a war zone, and you think of, I need to have my little sort of magazine with me under my plate, on me. And I thought, that's the kind of thing you think, yeah, but that's how, we, as I say, trying to explain is you don't really think about, what's going on around you. You do what's comfortable for you, and for him probably it was a normal thing to have, that kind of magazine with him on his body armored, saying, well, and I'm thinking, really, you're never going to read that, if we stay overnight all together outside in Helmand province under the stars, you're not going to suddenly, I'm going to have a read. It's just, so it's that kind of thing, that makes it realize that actually, yeah, we are trained well, so we don't really let things, influence or have an impact on us. We are together, we have a mission, we get trained, very well trained, and therefore we do what we have to do. And that's the kind of normality that you have, that allows you to, I guess, especially for the very young soldiers that have never experienced anything before, to say, yeah, I can, and as you know, it's a British way as well. Young lads, they are very witty and and they are, a bit kind of a renegade at times and say, well, yeah, I'll get my thing. It's for me. So I think that was the combination of everything. So yeah.
But for you, as a person who's responsible for people, there must have been moments, surely, that went through your head, despite your training, where you thought, I can't do this.
In all fairness, no, you never. And I think again, potentially, maybe it's a British thing. I don't know. We don't surrender. I think, like we always try to say to some other allies or nations, But no, he never. He never said. I've never said, I can't do that. No, because on your own. You're never on your own. You are. And this is where the British Army is well set up. When you have, a lot of non-commissioned officers. You have your warrant officers, your sergeants. That have been in the army. They know it all. And they know how the officers behave, and they know how the soldiers, and they are very good at. You got your network of peers. Officers' peers, and so you never say, no, I can't do that. I'm never going to be able to do that. You don't, because that's what you do. And that's what you train for. That's what, and that people count on you, so you can't. And if it's the case, you always have a warrant officer or a senior non-commissioned officer that will have the pleasure to remind you that you are. It's not necessarily that you're always in charge, and I never had the privilege to command a company or a platoon in Afghanistan. But as an officer, you have always you bear authority anyway, so you always have it's always a pleasure of a warrant officer or of a non-commissioned officer to remind the officers there. So I got you. You are. But in all fairness, no, it never came across to me to say, oh no, I can't do that. No, you find a way. There are tough moments when you breathe hard and you have to reflect, but very quickly you know that people depend on you. That it's not just about you. You're not just on your own. That you have the whole machine there. So you work. That's what makes you, makes you going forward. So, but no, I've never really ever considered once to say, I can't do that. No, it's just sometimes you say, how am I going to do that? Yes, that's the kind of thing that you think more about how I'm going to do that. And this is when you have your peers, you got your warrant officer, your sergeants that've got the experience and know the men well. To say, yeah, well, maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not a good idea, maybe you should do that. But that's just, but never said no, never said, I can't do that. No, that's not, because otherwise it's no point. There's no point being in the military, because this is the job we're in. We find ourselves in all sort of situation, all over the place, wherever, we get sent, and you have to deal with it, no matter what comes. So
we'll go back to your specific role, and you had a few, I would imagine, during this whole period. And one of the things that you were trained for was being unable to identify the Taliban amongst the locals. I remember doing many of these exercises. But in practice, that would have been extremely problematic, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I think in the early days it wasn't, because I think the Taliban was playing, playing the game, I would say, which is basically we were. They had at the time in the early days of Afghanistan, they were quite happy to engage us as a body of troops, as we would call it. So you would know that was the Taliban. But I think within my first tour, very quickly realised actually they were quite happy to engage with us and then disappear within the population. And it's, again, I think the training, the expertise and the professionalism of the troops is the fact that we understand very quickly that, we would not engage in, further than that. So if we had a contact with the Taliban and they were disappearing in a village, we would not, go after them. Because I remember one thing that, I got told one time, you say, if we don't see them today, we'll see them tomorrow. And therefore that was the kind of the pattern of work, in the fact that, okay, we have a contact with the Taliban today, they disappear, fed in the population, we would say, okay, well, we'll come again tomorrow and we'll meet them again tomorrow somewhere else. So, but we never, and this is where potentially we were very good. What we did, in Afghanistan is the fact that we never said, well, okay, we're going to go after them, and and then you find the problem of, as you said, you can't differentiate between, a normal Afghan person to the Taliban, understanding as well as as I do, that in Afghanistan, everybody has a weapon. Everybody has a weapon in their compound, because that's just the way Afghans are. It's, as you say, it's very much protecting their home, protecting whatever, sort of goats and sheep and cattle. So therefore they have a weapon. So you can't, and we learned that very, very quickly. That's something that we knew. So, but it became more difficult later on, where we're starting engaging with the population for other things. When we did capacity building. That was more difficult, because we were going into more urban areas to talk to the people, and the Taliban knew that we were having that sort of soft approach, the soft skills, which is talking to the people, understanding what the problem and see if we can help them with a well that was not working properly. And I think the Taliban, played on that, so they were quite happy to engage, and that became very, very tricky. And we. Interestingly enough, we never had many incidents in going into a village where suddenly the villagers were turning on us, against us. It never really happened, and I think it's linked potentially to that Pashtunwali thing, that you come into there, and they say you are now under our protection. So we sort of agree, and I experienced that several times when they offer you, milk and bread and those big flat breads, and you do it, and it's part of the culture. But it became, I think I would say what was more difficult is what we used to call the insider threat. The sort of the Taliban fighters that were infiltrating within the security forces and decided to at any time to kill British, Americans, whatever, coalition forces, because they were wearing an Afghan uniform. And again, experienced that, a couple of times. But that was probably the more difficult things to assess, try to anticipate. But I think that's, everybody's got different stories. In my tours, a lot of people had more kinetic tours. Some of the infantry companies were constantly in villages, and trying to find out the Taliban, just to. So I guess probably their experience would have been slightly different in terms of how you. But I remember one thing. I remember one particular incident. We're in a village, and we were actually fired upon from a mosque. And it was interesting because we had this debate for a little while about, what do we do? Do we, and we did not, we withdrew. We did not, because I think we were, very, very quickly, very early on the campaign, we were very, very sensitive to, the cultural aspect, the religious aspect of Afghanistan, because it was, and I said that, if you remember, I went in 2006, but we had been in Iraq, since 2003. And therefore, we